for so many of us, we're so busy, 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 right? There's, the hamster wheel of life, especially when you're, in a career in a corporate job like I was. There was no time to just sit still and be quiet and listen to that inner voice. And once I started doing that, that inner voice, that higher power could speak to me in that quiet, still moment or two that I would take and could help me make decisions. Like I could rely on my intuition to point me in the right direction and to help me make the hard decisions about everything else that I needed to make decisions about.
Welcome to CancerTalks, a podcast sharing personal stories of transformation and collective healing from people who have been touched by cancer. My name is Claire DeLaslo, and I'll be guiding today's conversation. Our guest, Karla Mans-Giroux, is a holistic cancer coach, inspirational speaker, workshop facilitator, and cancer thriver. Karla works with other cancer thrivers to approach health with the whole person in mind. She knows that healing requires working with the body, mind, and spirit. In addition to developing food and exercise plans, Karla's coaching can include topics as diverse as news consumption, social media, stress management, and deepening your spiritual practice. For our regular listeners, it will come as no surprise that Karla is a big fan of Dr. Kelly Turner's works, Radical Remission and Radical Hope. One of my favorite takeaways from our conversation was the idea that you can use your intuition as a foundation for working with the other 9 healing factors. If we strengthen our intuition, we can turn to it for guidance whenever we need help making decisions about our healing. On a related note, we have an intuition workshop coming up this June 2022, so keep an eye out for that in an email with details. Hi Karla, welcome to CancerTalks.
Hi Claire, thank you.
So I wanted to get started by hearing a little bit about the version of Karla who existed before the first cancer diagnosis. What were you doing? Where were you? How did you see yourself? How did your friends see you? Who was Karla?
Well, that we got to go back 20 years for. So, Karla has always been very optimistic and energetic and extroverted. And life was good. I was married. I had 2 young children. I had a new career, and things were really, really good. I was a seeker always from a spiritual perspective, seeking, what more does life have to offer? How can I grow? How can I improve myself? I like to think of myself as a lifelong learner, though I've not always been in school, but I've always been interested in learning more. Yeah, and I was also, I'll be real honest, a little bit of a party girl. Certainly in my younger days, having fun and, not really thinking that I'd ever have any health concerns, not having that at the forefront of my mind. And when I became a mom, certainly things settled down and I was really focused on my family. And it never, again, occurred to me to think I needed to do anything differently. Through my very first pregnancy, and then again with my second pregnancy, I was really focused on healthy eating. I wanted to be as healthy as possible for those new babies growing inside of me. And I followed religiously the book on what to do when you're expecting and how to eat or what to eat when you're expecting. And I kept track of every morsel I put in my mouth and made sure that it counted. So when I got the diagnosis, I was 37 years old. My oldest was 5.5, and the youngest was 2. And so that was definitely pretty scary to get that diagnosis, thinking that I was healthy. And where did this come from? There was no history of it. And breast cancer kind of blew me away.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've thought about the idea of like looking 5 or 8 years back. People have different numbers, but reflecting on when the cancer might have started before it was
Oh,
noticed.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
is there a
I
part of your
definitely.
story that you pinpoint?
I think that it was, I don't know that I can pinpoint a year. I can just pinpoint that I was not conscious of how my behaviors might have been affecting my health, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, what I thought health meant was what I ate and how I exercised. I didn't really think about the emotional um,
Mm-hmm.
things that might have been going on. And there were definitely things going on that only made me think that that would have been the problem. I looked at a lot of, what are the contributing factors? Because for me, I don't think there's any one thing
Of course.
that triggers the cancer. I mean, we know there are certain causes of cancer, but over and above that, for me, none of those particular things were what caused cancer. So I looked at what are the contributing factors. And honestly, I didn't look at it probably right then. It was later. It was with
Yeah.
my metastatic diagnosis that I began to look at that. And I realized that, my diet wasn't that healthy. It was the standard American diet. My exercise was minimal because I didn't really like to sweat. I was chasing a couple of
Mm,
toddlers around, and before babies,
sure.
I led an active life, but it wasn't like I went to the gym and really worked out and really did a lot of sweating and, hardcore exercise. And I also had dealt with a lot of yeast infections throughout
Mm,
my young adult life. And those yeast infections, early on, a doctor, a gynecologist, shared with me information about how sugar feeds that yeast. And while
yeah.
I looked at that, I didn't really make changes to my diet to eliminate the sugar. And so I dealt with those yeast infections by eating a yogurt every day. And that yogurt
With
was
sugar.
with sugar, but it
Yep.
did keep the yeast infections away.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So while it kept him away, it was probably feeding him whatever. So it wasn't until my son, my oldest, was probably about 8 or 9 and was dealing with some attention deficit issues that we looked
Mm,
at doing a complete elimination diet.
yeah.
And that's when I really got a handle on the whole diet thing and the sugar and just eliminating and then adding the good foods back in to understand what was impacting my health as well as his and his
Yeah.
attention. Yeah.
I want to take a little step back to get a slightly fuller picture of young Karla
Hmm.
because you said you were a party girl, but I also heard on some of your other podcast episodes that you worked really hard.
Mm.
You had a pretty serious job where I was hearing like more than 40 hours a week. And was it like was Karla work hard, play hard?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Carlo was definitely work hard, play hard.
So what
And
was that? Yeah, what was your work life like before your first
yeah.
diagnosis?
And you know what? It really all what I've realized now is that it stems from that need for external validation. So I
Mm,
wanted to be the good girl and I wanted to
yeah.
get the gold star and I wanted to get validation from others that I was good enough and that I was worthy. And that played out in several aspects of my life. But from a work perspective, I was very driven and striving and wanted to be the best and get the recognitions and, continue to move up. And really, the job that I had when I got the first diagnosis was a new job, just about a year in, I
Mm-hmm.
think,
Wow.
because I remember how surprised I was at how supportive they were for somebody, such a new employee to be so well supported throughout that journey. But prior to that, even though the job wasn't as big of a job, I still had a lot of expectations for myself to
Right.
do more and do better. And again, to strive for that validation and get those recognitions and rewards and things
I
that
know
came
the
with it.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and It was a stress job too because there was a deadline. It was,
Hmm.
always a deadline. I was always working against a deadline, and my work depended on other people providing things. And if they were late, that didn't change the deadline. That meant
Hmm.
Karla had to, just do more and get it done on the deadline.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So, did you receive your first cancer diagnosis in your first round of dealing with cancer? Was that a moment that made you slow down?
definitely. It did to a degree, but I was 37 years old and I had that new career, a new
Hmm.
company, and I had still plans to strive and to climb the ladder. And it slowed me down, but only for, the surgery gave me, 6, 8 weeks off work, right? And then I was
Yeah.
right back to work all throughout my
Wow.
chemotherapy.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, and the company, well, I probably could have easily asked for a 3 month short-term disability,
Yeah.
I didn't. And nobody suggested it. So I just kept going because I appeared to be really strong and healthy. And honestly, I was. I got
Sure.
through all of my treatment relatively easily,
Hmm.
compared to what a lot of other people deal with when they go through that. But at 37 years old, with the health I did have, with the optimism that I had, with the belief that I was going to be okay, that mindset really helped me to get through it. And I slowed down only for the recovery, that was sort of standard to go with it. And
Right.
as soon as my 9 months of treatment were over, I went right back to it and kept climbing that ladder. And I had those two little kids
Hmm.
to raise and do things with and for. And yeah, so no, I didn't
Yeah.
really get that message to slow down permanently.
And so you were 11 years seemingly cancer free. And
Right.
then,
And then the dreaded metastatic breast cancer diagnosis.
mm,
Yeah, I and at 11 years after the original diagnosis, each anniversary of one more year away from that
mhm.
diagnosis made me feel safer and safer. Certainly 5 years was, yoo-hoo, woohoo, I got a big celebration here. 10 years was huge. I'm like, I made it. I'm done. It's good. I'm
Yeah.
not going to get this
Oh,
again. So when that diagnosis came along, the symptoms, I was clueless to the fact that it might have been cancer. It never even dawned on
wow.
me that it might have been cancer. And I went from, so the symptom was numbness on my left shin, which
Oh,
progressed to no longer being able to do lunges. So I was actually exercising more.
yeah.
And
Great.
I was
That's
working with
good.
yeah, working with the personal trainer, and I'm like, why is that when I try to lunge on my left leg, it would fall out from underneath me. And so when that numbness really showed up, I started working with my chiropractor thinking, it's a pinched nerve. I'd been seeing him, little body work here and there. And after a few weeks of him working on it, it's like it's not making any difference. He recommended I go see an orthopedic doctor. So I went to an orthoped and he took a look and he took an x-ray of my knee and said, there's nothing wrong with you. Why don't you go to a neurologist and see what's going on?
Hmm.
And the neurologist put me through an excruciating nerve test and then did an MRI. And it wasn't until I got the call, I had that MRI done on a Thursday, and they said, we'll call you next week. And I'm like, fine. There was no worry. I had no thought that this
Sure.
might be
Yeah.
something serious. But he called me on a Friday afternoon the next day and said, given your history, we see some suspicious spots. I've called your general practitioner and she's waiting to see you in her office.
Wow.
So that's when it hit me like, oh
Mm.
my God,
Did you think
this,
cancer in that moment or just it's
yeah,
serious?
no, cancer.
Yeah.
Because, you know, with your history of cancer, we see some suspicious spots of, he didn't
I
say the
see.
word, but
Yeah.
he didn't
Yeah.
have to. That's when it hit me.
Sure.
And then when I called my general practitioner, she said, why don't you come in and let's talk, bring hubby with you. And that was another moment of, oh
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah. That's
And
awful.
it was a Friday afternoon, and I hadn't seen my oncologist in I don't know how long. And, even I may have called that afternoon and, like, well, you're considered a new patient, so we can get you in here in 3, 4 weeks, whatever it was. But my general
Wow.
practitioner was lovely. She was wonderful. She, reassured me. But yes, there were suspicious spots all over my spine, my hips, my pelvis, etc. So she did what she could to sort of move along that appointment with my previous oncologist. And I had to sit with it over the weekend, not knowing what all of this really meant. And that was
Mm.
excruciating. And I thought, and my husband and I both thought that it was a death sentence. Like, there's
Wow.
cancer all over my body. How do I
Right.
survive that? Like, and the boys were
Even
just
though you had survived cancer, it
right.
still rang. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so hard. I mean, we have, I think almost in every podcast episode we've done, we speak those words, cancer is not a death sentence. And
right,
even for someone like you who lived through and beyond cancer one time, it's so hard to decouple those.
right, right.
Yeah.
And honestly, the early stage breast cancer diagnosis, that's not what women die of. It's
Mm-hmm.
the
Right.
later stage, the
Yeah.
metastatic. But I didn't
Yeah.
know anything about it. And on Monday, when I was able to talk to my oncologist, it was so helpful because God bless him, he
Mm.
told me this is a chronic disease we can manage.
Wow.
And I said, all right, I'm going to manage the hell out of this because I have always intended to live to be 100 plus years old, and I'm not giving up on that goal. And he said, fine, I'll help you get there, but I won't be around when you hit 100. So, and that's when I started the whole I'm going to manage the hell out of this. And in my career, I had been a project manager and I knew
Uh-huh.
what it took to manage things. And I got to work immediately.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
I want to introduce Radical Remission here because
Yeah.
you are a certified Radical Remission coach. There are lots of podcasts on Radical Remission, lots of podcasts with you talking about Radical Remission. So I'll link some of those in the show notes. But I thought it'd be nice to hear more about your journey through the lens of some of the key factors of radical remission.
Yeah, no, that'd
Um,
be great. And I am really
yeah.
passionate about radical remission and the 10 healing factors. I will say that the book, I was diagnosed in late 2014, and Dr. Kelly Turner's first book, Radical Remission, was published in 2015. I don't
Uh-huh.
think I found it until 2016. And as I went through it and read it, I went, oh, check, check, check. I've done that, done that, done that. I'm
Oh,
living that. I'm
cool.
living that healing factor.
Yes.
And then there were a few that I went, oh, okay, we need to work on this.
Uh-huh.
So,
What were
you
those
know,
few?
so for me, the first few, and I did start working with a cancer coach immediately um, to help me. Like, I'm going to manage this. So, what do I need to know and do? And while I
Yeah.
did the conventional treatment, and my cancer was estrogen and progesterone positive and
Mm-hmm.
HER2 negative, so it responded well to the hormone treatments. And I was also just past menopause, so I was able to take the meds that they offer for that. But I also put a lot of the complementary practices in place. I looked at my exercise, my nutrition. I was looking at, how do I support my body and my mind and spirit, and cleaning up the toxins in my life, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got to the book, The Radical Remission 10 Healing Factors, the ones that I still needed to work on and learn more about was releasing suppressed emotions
Mm-hmm.
and what was the other one? Because, empowerment and
Following your
intuition.
intuition. Oh,
Yeah,
you got that.
yeah. And, I felt empowered to a degree, but I took it to a new level after reading the book.
Yeah.
And certainly intuition wasn't something that I had really been thinking about before. And intuition can be, in my mind, considered sort of foundational to the radical remission factors, because your intuition, if you get in touch with it, if you hone it, if you practice your intuition, you can rely on it more. And for so
Yeah.
many of us, we're so busy, 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 right? There's, the hamster wheel of life, especially when you're, in a career in a corporate job like I was. There was no time to just sit still and be quiet and listen
Yeah.
to that
Yeah.
inner voice, to that higher power. And once I started doing that, that inner voice, that higher power could speak to me in that quiet, still moment or two that
Mm-hmm.
I would take, and could help me make decisions. Like I could rely on my intuition to point me in the right direction and to help me make the hard decisions about everything else that I needed to make decisions about.
Right. About what feels good to eat, about whether you trust your doctor, about
Right.
which
Yep.
friends you need to bring closer into your healing. It's like
Exactly.
it really, yeah, I love thinking about it. That is the foundation for the other healing
Yeah,
factors.
it is. And we none of the factors are more important than the others, at least not that we've
Sure.
found at this point. But, and somebody else might pick something different as foundational for them. But because you can use it to help you make decisions about all the rest of it, it really does make sense to, really kind of focus on that. And so many of us, again, we don't sit in stillness and get quiet and
Mm-hmm.
listen and trust that inner voice and that higher power, however you want to think about it. So that can be really life changing when you do sit down and start
Yeah.
practicing.
Could you tell a little story about a moment in your cancer journey that you followed your intuition?
Mm. So the moment that is the most impactful for me was I had been with my conventional oncologist that I utilized through my early stage diagnosis. And I wanted to do everything that I could in my power. I wanted to leave no stone unturned. I wasn't just going to do the meds that he gave me,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew there was more that could help support me, my mind, body, and spirit, right?
Right.
But he would poo-poo me and roll his eyes at me and really not support me in my nutrition, herbs and supplements, and all the other things that I wanted to do. And certainly
Yeah.
at that point, I wasn't even looking at, emotional. I was working on my own spiritual and things of that nature, but none of that came up with him. And I got tired of being brushed off or told that, if you want to waste your money on that, go over to the integrative
Oh.
department. The integrative department was 2 blocks away in a different building. So how
Mm-hmm.
integrative is that? And
Right.
he obviously didn't put any weight on it because, again, he'd brushed me off. So I looked for and found an integrative oncologist. And lucky enough, there was one in the Chicagoland area where I live, and I talked to a couple people that had seen that particular doctor. And so I went for the initial consultation. And it was shortly after that initial consultation. At that time, I didn't fully move my treatment over to this doctor, but shortly after that, a liver tumor showed up. So my
Wow.
cancer initially was all on the bone. So all
Yeah.
over my, as I mentioned, my spine, my hips, my pelvis, my clavicle, it was all over the bones in my torso basically, but not organs. There were a couple of little suspicious spots in the lungs, ended up never amounting to anything, but the liver tumor showed up. And at that point, my intuition told me, and I spoke to both doctors about it, and the conventional guy had one way of looking at it, and the integrative guy had a different way of looking at it, and
Mm-hmm.
I went with the integrative guy. Like, this
Yeah.
is the guy that I can partner with for my healing. This is, the signs are telling me to move there, and certainly the intuition and deepening the spiritual connection and believing in the signs that the universe or God or, a higher power provide you with
Yeah.
really meant something to me. And so I switched my care over to the integrative oncologist. Within 3 months, that tumor was 50% receded. Kind of
Wow.
said that weird, but it was 50% better. It was almost,
Yeah.
within 6 months, it was fully resolved
Wow.
because this doctor believed in and had a nutrition plan he wanted me to follow, believed in and air quote prescribed herbs and supplements for me,
Mm-hmm.
believed in and recommended an exercise program he wanted me to follow, believed in the mind, body, spirit, and set me up with, you need stress management, you need
Yeah.
deepening your spiritual connection and following your intuition and all of that.
And it also sounds like he believed in you to know what was best for your own healing.
Absolutely. He was more of a partner
Yeah.
um, than, the authoritarian that knows better,
Mm-hmm.
which, more and more doctors are getting better at believing that you know best, but there's still so many that think they know best.
Right.
And, they do have training that tells them that these conventional meds are all there is. Conventional chemotherapy and surgery and radiation is all there is. They're not trained in diet and herbs and supplement or any of the rest of this.
Yeah.
So taking an integrative approach often requires you to be empowered to do that for yourself and to really manage it all on your own. But
Yeah.
if you can find an integrative doctor, an integrative oncologist, it's so much easier because you then have a partner in your healing. And this particular doctor gave me so much hope. Whereas other doctors, the conventional guy I was with, just not that he didn't give me hope, because again, God bless him, he told me it was a chronic disease I could manage.
Yeah.
But it was limited hope.
Mm-hmm. Was it a difficult financial decision to switch to the integrative doctor? Because I
I
know
was
that's
so,
a
so blessed because he was in network with my insurance.
amazing.
Yes, it was
Wow.
amazing. Yeah, and it just and I did I think there was the rest of that year he was it might have been actually now that I'm remembering it, back in 2016 when I switched over to him about midway through the year. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't in network for my insurance, so it was paid, I only had to pay 20% of it. And I switched over to my husband's insurance when the open enrollment came in November, so that in January of 2017, my husband's plan was fully in network with this doctor.
Oh, wow.
So definitely a blessing to
I
have
actually,
that.
this is the first I'm hearing of an integrative oncologist who takes insurance. I actually didn't know those existed.
Yes. Well, and it is an integrative approach. There's still standard of care, and he
Sure.
still
Yeah.
follows standard of care and offers the chemotherapy, and he does it in a chronomodulated way so that it's working with your circadian rhythms. And so he has a bit of a different approach, but he also uses standard chemotherapy or standard drugs, but then he offers his expertise around nutrition, herbs and supplements, exercise, mind, body, spirit, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
And so he brings it all together. He does vitamin C infusions and things like that. So he walks a little bit of a fine line between that standard of care and introducing these other evidence based ways of dealing with cancer.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And I think
Mm-hmm.
another phrase that I hear a lot is throwing the kitchen sink at it, which is often what someone who receives a diagnosis wants to do. Like, I'll
Right,
try anything. But it's rare to find a doctor who wants to do the same, who's willing to try everything
right,
at once. Or,
right.
yeah,
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I like to call it leaving no stone unturned. Like we're going to try everything and do
yeah,
everything.
look
And
everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
And
pick
while,
something up and leave it if it doesn't work. And,
exactly,
yeah.
try it for 3 months. If it doesn't make a difference, if your symptoms aren't better, if it doesn't make you feel better, then maybe it's not the right thing. And that's where your
Mm-hmm.
intuition can help you make decisions on what you
Yeah.
need to do as well.
Do you have a daily or any kind of regular practice to hone your intuition?
Yes, I do my meditation daily, most days. There are
Mm-hmm.
definitely times when I miss it. But I do try to sit quietly listening for that voice. And even if I follow a guided meditation, I'm trying to slow down the racing mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for some people, oh, I'm not a meditator. I can't slow my mind down. Nobody can stop all their racing thoughts. But the point of meditation is to practice it so that you get a little bit more of that quietness, a little bit more of a slowdown. And I think that's really important. And I also journal a lot, and I have my affirmations, and I try to just be more often rather than
Yeah.
do, right? So
Wow.
time to just sit and look out the window. I do a much better job of it when I can sit outside in the nice weather, and being in the
Yes.
Chicagoland area,
That
I've got
always
limited
helps.
months for that.
Yeah.
But when I can sit in my garden, I can do a really good job of just being. I have a what I
Mm.
call my serenity pond, and it's just a small little man-made waterfall pond, but
Mm-hmm.
every year frogs show up.
Oh,
A great teacher of how to just be, because just sit there.
yeah.
And so I sit and meditate and sit and watch the frogs and watch the bees come and nestle into the roses that are in my garden. And that's when I really get that time to just be and not do something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like pre-cancer Karla didn't do a lot of just being.
Never did that. No, never.
How many years ago was it that you started to cultivate like slowing down and
Really, with that metastatic diagnosis, that's when I
yeah,
got the message. And
yeah,
I took, I tell people I was older and smarter. I took the 3 month short-term disability from work.
good.
And, at that point, I had risen to, a director level position within this corporation that I worked for. And it's like, doesn't even matter anymore. I'm what's important. I'm taking 3 months off. And having been with that company for as long as I had the credibility and the ability to come back and say, I'm not going to kill myself over this job.
Yeah.
And it was a time when, the organizational structure was changing and a new job was on the horizon for me, taking on a new department that had never existed before and doing something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to come back in to set that up my way and commit only as much time as I was willing to commit to it. And I was able to put boundaries on the work that I did. And, as a salaried director, saying, I'm only working 40 hours a week, if that, was
Wow. Yeah.
not really something everybody gets to do.
Yeah.
But I was able to do that. And when you produce the results that need to be produced, it shouldn't matter how much time it takes you to do
No,
that.
it shouldn't.
And I really feel like nobody should have to get a diagnosis to say, I'm only going to work 40 hours. That
Right.
should just be the way it is.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not the way it is.
It's so inspiring to just be hearing, the second round of cancer from a medical perspective is much scarier than the first bout. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I'm also hearing that you were living even more fully and just, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
living your life.
definitely waking up and becoming conscious to it and thinking
Yeah.
about my behaviors and how they mattered to my health. It was definitely a wake up call, and I definitely learned a lot from the diagnosis. And I'm blessed to now have 6 years with no evidence of disease. So once that liver tumor was resolved,
Yeah.
we've seen no sign of cancer in my body since.
Wow.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. It's amazing, and I'm just grateful for it every day. And I am also grateful that in 2019 I was able to stop working that corporate job that was so stressful.
Yes.
And start to live a completely different way and own my day and be in control of what I did, and each day, and how I lived it. And that's, with that, it was a lucky, the company's moving out of the area, so here's a severance package for your 18 years of working here.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I went off. I know, it was such a blessing. That's when I went off to get my coaching certification. And so I got my coaching training. I got my radical remission coach and teacher training. I went and got my national board certification, and hung out my shingle as a holistic cancer coach to help people learn how they can leave no stone unturned and utilize holistic practices like the 10 healing factors from radical remission to help themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to get deep into your coaching work with health navigators and on your own. We're going to include, again, in the show notes, links to your website and everything. But I would love to hear a little bit about what a coaching session or coaching relationship can look like with you.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful thing to do with people because they're looking for help and inspiration, and how do I do this, and it can be overwhelming and I don't know what to do first. So my coaching sessions can be based on the radical remission healing factors or not.
Mm-hmm.
I like to meet people where they are. What have you already done? What do you feel like you've got a good handle on? And where do you feel like you need help? And there are people that come to me that haven't the slightest idea where to begin. So that's where we begin.
Yeah.
And it's, looking at mindset is often the first thing we do, but kind of getting an assessment of these healing factors, as well as things that aren't specifically called out as a healing factor, like stress and fear and forgiveness. And how are you sleeping, and what
Mm-hmm.
is your typical mindset? Do you come at things from a positive perspective, or are you more of a skeptic and a little bit more negative? And how can we help you shift your perception and shift your belief in healing? And when I say healing, it doesn't necessarily mean cure. So some of us
Yeah.
are never going to get a cure, but we can absolutely be healed.
Yes.
And others can be cured, but not healed,
Right.
right? So I feel like I have healed my life, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to claim that I have a cure, because metastatic breast cancer is all about the recurrence coming
Yeah.
back at some point. I would love, and I do kind of believe that I'm going to make it to 100 healthy and sane with no more recurrences, but check back with me in 10 and 20 years and I'll keep you posted.
Right. You're
But for
healing, you know? It's
Yeah,
a
continuing to
process.
heal. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is it is a process. And these lifestyle changes that I've made, these radical remission healing factors are lifestyle changes. They need to be permanent. You can't do them for a little
Mm,
while, get a good scan, and then go, great, now I can go back to how I used to live. You need to put these lifestyle changes into place as permanent lifestyle changes.
yeah.
And that's what I learned by having the early stage diagnosis, not making these types of changes, and then getting that metastatic diagnosis. So
Yeah.
now I know I don't ever want to go back to that. I don't ever want to get that kind of news again. So these lifestyle changes I've made are permanent. And in helping other people to learn this, again, it's getting that basic, where's the mindset? What do you believe in? And what do we need to work on first? And many people really want to focus on nutrition first.
Yeah.
And there's so many different ways. There is no one silver bullet when it comes to nutrition. So, focusing on that, while it's not a bad idea, and there are things that you can do and small steps you can take to start to change that, you really do need to work on your intuition first
Mm-hmm.
to understand, what does your body need from a nutritional perspective, and then realize that that's not the silver bullet, and nor is herbs and supplements,
Right.
nor is exercise. But those are
Uh,
the only three physical healing factors that come up in the Radical Remission book. Radical Remission is based on over 10 years of research that Dr. Turner did on people who had what the medical community called spontaneous remission. She decided to call it radical because nothing was spontaneous about it. These people worked hard, and these 10 healing factors are the common factors that every single one of these 1,500 plus people did to overcome their cancer diagnosis. And many of them had tried a conventional way, and conventional treatment had failed them and sent them home on hospice. And yet they found a complete remission and went on to live, 20, 30, still going with their remission. Others had tried a completely alternative approach. And Dr. Turner has nothing against conventional treatment. She just wanted to know and learn from these people that had found these remissions and what did they do. So these 10 healing factors can be utilized even if you're on conventional treatment.
right.
And certainly they can't hurt you. They're only going to help you. All of them are really about supporting your immune system. And Dr. Turner cites individual separate studies that have been done that show why these factors do support your immune system healing, getting back into a place where your body can heal itself. Because the body can heal itself. We just need to make sure that the mind and the spirit are supporting that healing, and that the body, those three physical factors, are also in place. The other factors are spiritual and emotional. So it's things like empowerment, intuition, releasing suppressed emotions, increasing positive emotions, increasing your social support, deepening your spiritual connection, and having strong reasons for living.
Mm-hmm. I think the immune system is such an exciting thing to talk about because I think it has a lot of potential to bridge between the mainstream medical system and these other less physical aspects of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone, any doctor would say the immune system is important for healing,
Right.
right? But people don't often connect those non-physical aspects to immune system. So that's
Right.
really important to
Right.
think about those.
Yeah, and if you look at social support, there is tons of evidence, tons of studies that have been done that show that social support has a more protective factor, it has a more protection for us than not smoking,
Wow.
not eating healthy, and not exercising combined. Now, it doesn't mean you should go out and do those and just up your social support. You should do all of it.
Yeah.
And the fact that your social support doesn't have to be like this giant group of people that are helping you. It's based on what you perceive to be socially supportive.
Yeah.
And that can include, one partner in your life and a couple of really good friends and your dog. Or it can be, your whole church community, or it can be whatever it is to you
Yeah.
that's socially supportive. That's what matters. It's your perception of support. And it's not just about being supported, but it's about receiving love and support.
Yeah.
And many of us are so good at giving love and support and not so good at receiving love and support. So,
Right.
in my early stage diagnosis, this was a lesson that my husband and I both had to learn. Like, how do
I
you
was gonna
receive
ask.
the
Yeah.
love and support, right? How do you
Yeah.
how do you accept all of that? Because there's always an outpouring from your community. If you're open about it and you're telling people about it, there were tons of people from from work, from my church community, from, friends and family. Everybody wanted to help and wanted to do something. So, of course, the meal train gets started and meals are being delivered and things like that. And that's great and that's wonderful. The one instance that was really impactful for even more for my husband than for me, was one of my best friends came over to the house after surgery, and she showed up with a mop and a bucket and her cleaning supplies. And she's like, I'm going to clean the house for you. And I'm like, oh, God bless you. I can't.
Wow.
That would be
Yeah.
wonderful. My husband was like, no, you're not. And he kept taking the bucket and the mop away from
Yeah.
her. He's like, no, you're not cleaning our house. You don't need to do that. And she goes, I know I don't need to. I want to, and I'm going to. And I'm like, honey, you back away and you
Yeah.
let her do what she's
Receive.
here to do. He
Yeah.
had me and a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old to take care of. He didn't also need to be cleaning the house.
Yeah.
So it was a big lesson for both of us. And it's so hard for people to accept that kind of help because we're brought up to believe that we're strong enough and that, to ask for help is weak. And that's not true.
Yeah.
Asking for help is really the strong way to be. Like, I recognizing that I need help from someone is so powerful. And I recommend to my clients that they make a list of the things they need to do
Mm.
and then think about the things that they don't really have the time to focus on now because they're focused on their healing.
Yeah.
And those things that need to be done, but that you don't necessarily need to be the one doing, are the things you can ask people to help you with.
That's great. Yeah. I have a hard time with that, mostly because I know exactly how I want things done.
Mm-hmm.
So another hard part is not
Yep.
just letting people help you, but letting it be okay that for this time when you need extra support, that someone else does it with love and how they would do it. And it might not be exactly how you would do it.
Exactly. Exactly. So they
Yeah.
didn't fold the towels out of the dryer the way you do. So what? Let
Right.
it go.
You have cancer.
Right. You got a
Relax.
lot bigger things to worry about right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. I'm thinking about those clients of yours who you're telling the most important part is to make these changes for life.
Mm-hmm.
And you're obviously a very organized, driven person who loves to manage the hell out of things. But
Right.
I'm thinking of those clients who might have a much harder time sticking to the changes.
Mm-hmm.
How do you support them in that?
Yeah, change is hard. That's what I did in my corporate career was change management, helping people within the organization
Wow.
adapt to change. And it's hard. It can be disruptive. You're set on your ways. But really, it's all about taking baby steps. So if you can set a micro goal and take that step, then you've just had a success. And now let's look at what's the next step that you need to take. And you just keep building on that. So having a plan, and not everybody loves to have goals, but call it a game plan, call it your goals, call it whatever you want to call it. Um, it's all about taking those small steps because the small steps add up. You don't have to change everything at once. You focus on one thing and you do it. And as you have success, you're more likely to keep doing it or do
Mm-hmm.
more, take that next step. And next thing you know, you've got a habit. And it's about putting habits in place. So if you have a good habit already, let's add on to that. Or if you have a bad habit that we need to break, let's break the bad habit by adding in this new, better habit. And it's really talking to people about what works best for them. How have they seen success in their lives in the past when they needed to make a change, even if it was unrelated to their health? What was the most successful way they've been able to adapt to change, and looking at that and
Mm,
helping them decide what has worked for them in the past is what's going to work for them in the future. What works for me, I can tell them how it worked for me, but if that never worked for them before, it's probably not
yeah.
going to work for them now.
Yeah. That's such a good question. How have you adapted to change in the past?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Yeah, I think often cancer is it sounds so new, and so out of nowhere often when you receive the diagnosis.
Yeah,
But you're still you in your own body. And so many, whether it's patterns of stress or past relationships or your lifelong spiritual practices, all of these things haven't gone away or changed when you get that diagnosis. They're still you, and your tendencies are still you. What triggers
right.
you is still there. So I love the idea of really working with who that person is and was before the diagnosis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering if to close, you have an anecdote from any of your clients where you've watched that growth, a story of transformation, someone who came to you, however they were, and how you saw them begin to heal.
Yeah, I do. I have the perfect story. And it's actually about someone that I met when I attended the first radical remission workshop that I was exposed to. So Dr. Turner was still offering workshops back in 2019. And I went to that workshop and I met a woman there. And I was, still somewhat early in my healing journey. And that was 2017. And then
Mm-hmm.
in 2019, I went to the teacher training and hung out my shingle as a holistic cancer coach. And a woman that I met at that original workshop, we had connected and we didn't really keep in touch or anything, but she had a recurrence, went back and said, you know what? I went to that radical remission workshop. I need to look at radical remission again. She went on the website for radical remission and she was looking at, do I need to do a workshop again? Do I need to do coaching? And she found that, there were coaches for radical remission. And she found me and she remembered me and we started working together. And she has made such an amazing transformation.
Mm,
She had a stage 4 diagnosis,
wow.
and she was still working a very stressful job, still overweight, a little bit overweight, and eating the way she ate and living this busy, high powered, crazy lifestyle. And she needed to really transform all areas. The one that she had was a deep spiritual connection,
Mm,
but I watched her even deepen that more. And she had a family, so she had built in strong reasons for living, but she repaired some family relationships and dynamics.
wow.
She had belief in her ability to do this, and she's very empowered, but she really did need to work on diet and herbs and supplements and exercise and increasing her positive emotions. And she really did it. She stopped working and she focused on her healing, and she put 100% effort into herself, and she was blessed to be able to stop working, take
Right.
the disability, and really focus on herself. And she lost the weight and she juiced every day, and she learned how to cook a plant-based diet, and she did all of the things that she needed to do to heal herself. And she is living with a stage 4 diagnosis, looks like there's
Wow.
absolutely nothing wrong with her, and is just living her best life right now.
Are you still working with her?
Yeah, I see her or will talk to her periodically, but not on a regular because she's really gotten a good handle on things. She made these permanent lifestyle changes. And
Wow.
so we will touch base every now and then, or she'll come to one of the events that the Health Navigators has to offer. But she is really now at a point where these things are permanent lifestyle changes. She's not going to go back. So she's just moving forward in her life, and in doing all of this, it's easier now. It's hard to make these changes in the beginning. It feels like a struggle for her, for me, for all of us that want to do this. But there comes a time when you're like, oh, this is just part of my life now. This is just part of my day. This is just what I do.
Mm,
And that's where she's
yeah,
at.
that's amazing. Well, I'm so inspired, Karla. Is there anything you want to share before we close?
I would just like to tell people that hope is never a bad idea. And doing these lifestyle changes can make a huge difference. It can be done. There are many, many, many of us that can call ourselves radical remission survivors now, or we've got no evidence of disease, or we've overcome whatever the grim statistics were. And if we can do it, anyone can do it. And, everybody does have an individual journey. We all have to learn whatever it is we're meant to learn by, receiving this diagnosis. But if we embrace the learning and we're willing to make some hard changes, we can find our healing. And I'd love to invite people to check out Health Navigators and the community that my partner and I have built, and the workshops and the classes and the book clubs and all of the events that we have to offer, because we've brought together a like-minded community of people who also believe in leaving no stone unturned and doing everything within our power to find healing. And yeah, there's just some really great things and some great people within that community that can help others.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a review in your podcast app. CancerTalks is a platform for anyone who has been touched by cancer. If you'd like to be in community with other cancer thrivers seeking personal transformation, join us for free workshops on Zoom. Visit cancertalks.com/Zoom to register. If you're moved to donate, please visit cancertalks.com/donate.